Hey, welcome everyone to another short episode of 10 minutes. Actually, it's 10 minutes all the time, so it's not shorter than another 10 minutes but welcome to our show. That guy over there is Pinchy, who's not also known as Isaiah, but is Isaiah. And I'm Rupert, also known as Doctor. Okay, so today, Pinchy, I was reading through the Gospels and I came across this, and I'll just read it and then I'll go into what struck me about it. It's in Luke, and I believe it's chapter 10. And so, verse 38. And so it said, and this is where Jesus is in Bethany at the house of Lazarus. And it says in verse 38, now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. And so that scripture, many of us have heard perhaps numerous sermons on it, and the twist on it is always the focus of settling in and listening to the Lord versus being busy. But if we read that a little more carefully, it's very interesting because where it says that when the Lord tells Martha, 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 you are worried and distracted by many things. And then he said, there is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Now, it doesn't say Mary has chosen another thing. It says Mary has chosen the better part of the one thing, because Martha and Mary both loved the Lord and served him and were beginning to believe in him and had a relationship with him. And so sometimes there's always been a tension that of those who are doing and those who are not doing. And in this case, there's according to common sense, but also according to Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything, a time to reap, a time to sow, and et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a time to be busy. And there's a time to be quiet and listen and focus. And if we only had the choice between being busy making dinner or sitting at the Lord's feet, if those were only two choices in life, then we're gonna, and we had to pick one and never focus on the other, we're always going to pick sitting at the Lord's feet. But that's not a real choice. That's not real life. Real life involves many aspects: a time of sowing, a time of reading, a time of gathering stones, a time of casting stones away from one another, a time to embrace, a time not to embrace. So there's always been kind of a tension, and it's made some people feel guilty about their drive of focusing on, getting everybody taken care of, getting the food prepared, and those kinds of things, and those people have been made to feel guilty, like they're not spiritual. They're not there sitting humming in the corner. And then the others, maybe that are sitting at the Lord's feet, maybe they feel a little guilty because maybe they should be helping or whatever. But there's a time and a place for everything. And then when you think of Martha and Mary as sisters, of course they have quite a history together, like brothers and sisters or brothers and brothers. Each brother or sister will have a certain inclination or tendencies varied based on our gifts. But later, it's not that Martha never sat at the Lord's feet. And it's not that Mary never did, that she never did any work. They both did the opposite things at different times. Later on, when Mary actually, breaks the jar of ointment on the Lord's feet and wipes it with her hair and cries, and um, Jesus clearly says that when Judas and some of the others say, "Hey, that could have been sold and given to the poor," he said, "Leave her alone." And she is given out of, given to me, and indicating that he's recognizing that Mary worked hard for that expensive ointment. So Mary didn't work hard to get that expensive ointment by sitting in her corner praying. She was busy also. And then all the times that or that Martha served the Lord with food and care and lodging, preparing his room for him. Do we ever see Jesus rebuking her, say, "Hey, what are you giving me food to eat for? You know, we, what are you getting a nice place for me to lay down tonight for?" I'm sure he appreciated all of that. In fact, we don't see him saying, "Hey, thank you, Martha, for this plate of ribs," but chances are he was. Everyone has a role to play, and those roles will vary from time to time. So, um, it's important to realize that we need both. We need to be active like Martha, and we need to be contemplative like Mary, and quiet and listen. So that's just something interesting I saw. The fact that it says that Mary chose the better part of one thing. That one thing, which is the Lord said is necessary. That one thing includes activity and quietness at the Lord's feet. What is your thought on when you hear all this?
Well, it reminds me of the question that the Pharisees asked Jesus at another point. Why do you not fast like John and his disciples? And why do you eat and drink instead? And what Jesus says is, um, there right now, the bridegroom is here, but in the future he will go away, and then they will weep and there will be fasting. And what's interesting about that is the fact that he's kind of illustrating the same thing. There's a time for weeping, and then there's a time for joy and rest. And at that moment, that's the time that they were being called to rest and be with him. But at another point, he would go away, and then they would need to worry, not necessarily worry in the being anxious about a bunch of things, but then they would have trouble. Then there would be time for them to fast and, that kind of stuff. And so it's just interesting because it reminds me of that, very much so. There's
Well,
a time for everything.
Well, and not only that, the one you bring up about them, that's a perfect point where you bring up the Pharisees challenge them. Why don't you fast? Like, blah, blah, blah. Or why don't your disciples fast? And uh, they don't apparently take into account that they don't know everything about Jesus. Because how many of them have fasted for 40 days and 40 nights without water and food?
Right.
Probably not. Probably none of them. So and Jesus said, "Do your works in secret, so that your God, who sees you in secret, will reward you." And Jesus was the example, um, our example. And so there's many things that he did that the Pharisees didn't even consider. That maybe, you know, um,
Right.
they
He didn't
don't.
exclude that there was fasting as well during while he was here.
Or the times at night where he'd go alone and pray, when everyone else was asleep. And
That
so,
there's a there's a text in Hebrews that talks about Christ weeping and even shedding blood over the difficulty of going to the cross, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
similar things where him being here was a lot of difficulty, like the going to Egypt because he's going to be killed by Herod, and then coming back, and then there's a lot of trouble in Jesus' history and what you would call fasting, because I think the fasting included weeping is what he also said, right? So distress. And so there was a lot of distress in Jesus' ministry, and that's one of the marks of his ministry.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So that's all. That's all I had. Hey, good talk, everyone. Thank you for listening. And Pinchy, I'll give you the last word if you have any.
Nope. That's it.
All right. All right. Hey, good to see you. Godspeed.
Have a good week.